Here I am. It is 1 o'clock. Thank you for coming. Hello, Better Spaces is a health and happiness solution for today's hybrid workplace. My name is Dr. Paul Kachoa, and I'm a physical therapist and owner of PAR5 Physical Therapy here in Randolph, New Jersey. It's a beautiful Tuesday, and I've partnered with Better Spaces to bring you an easy and educational workday session. Today's session is core strength, building stability, for better performance. So we're going to explore the importance of core strength in reducing your risk of injury. We're going to cover the anatomy, a little bit of anatomy, the role of core stability in functional movements, and some practical exercises so that you can strengthen your core. All right, a little bit about me. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, got my doctorate from Mercy University in Dobbs Ferry, upstate New York. I have an exercise physiology degree from Rutgers University. I've been in the PT field for over 20 years. I'm a board certified orthopedic clinical specialist, certified dry needling specialist, certified golf fitness instructor, and certified CrossFit coach. So without further ado, again, like I mentioned before, use the chat so we can make this as helpful and useful as possible. Let's pull up our slides here and talk about core strength. Now, because I'm a medical professional, I got to put up this next slide. Let's turn this on here. That if you're dealing with something specific, some injury, then you need to have it assessed thoroughly. You should go out, get a physical exam, go see a physical therapist, and have all the root causes of your issue resolved. The stuff that we're going to be talking about today is, it's helpful, but it's aimed at a broad audience. So go slow with the stuff that we're going through, and just be aware that any video that you see online might not be the answer for your specific question. So it's not medical advice, it's not physical therapy, it's just general helpful tips. All right, so if you've been to any of my classes before, you've probably seen this video. It's how the body functions. Summarize everything up musculoskeletally in one slide here, that the body functions on this alternating pattern of stability and mobility. If this pattern is disrupted, then pain or injury is the result. So the big thing that we're going to be talking about is the core. What is the core? Well, it's anything between your ribs and your pelvis. So in this illustration or this picture here, it's really just the lower back. And then that lower back is supposed to be a stable segment. Now, certainly, if you're dealing with something, let's say, for example, knee pain, right, or hip pain or back pain, if one of these segments here does not fulfill its role, then the body will compensate and flip-flop and try and get what it's lost at that one segment from another. So let's just say, for example, if you have an unstable back, if your core is not working properly, then your body's like, hey, that lower back turned into a mobile segment. Why is that? Well, it might be because your hip or your thoracic spine, your T-spine, has gotten tight, or you lost range of motion there. So essentially, instead of a mobile segment, you've gotten a stable segment where your hips or your T-spine is tight, which can cause some of these stable segments to be unstable or mobile. And then that's when we get knee pain, back pain. So we want to look at that and make sure that we address everything above and below and look at you holistically as a human to figure out what exactly is the root cause, what's all of this connected. Now, I had another client come in the other day, a golfer, who wanted to improve his ability to hit the ball, play more golf. And he was telling me his routine, like, oh, he does sit-ups, he does these crunches and planks and all that stuff. And I said, well, all right, if we want to build a better athlete, meaning a better golfer, or whatever your sport is, that's the top of this pyramid to improve your skill or sport. But we really want to make sure that you have a good base. Range of motion, joint mobility, tissue extensibility, flexibility, those are two different things. And then strength and stability. So what we're going to be talking about today is that middle segment there, that's stability and strength. But if you don't have the sufficient range of motion, then we're going to build a house on sand, right? So we don't want that. So the things that we're going to be talking about today are core, is everything in between the ribs and the pelvis, like I said earlier, the abdominals, but also the back muscles, and everything is kind of connected into the hips to generate some power. So here's the abdominal muscle group here. Now, there's 4 different layers of abdominal muscles. The first layer, the most superficial one, is the rectus abdominis. It's a 6-pack thing that everybody sees that goes straight up and down. And then the next couple layers are the internal and external obliques, which run diagonally through the trunk. And they create rotation, all right? And then the deepest layer, and the one that we're most concerned about, and I will say this, is that if you're dealing with chronic back issues, this is the one layer that is the most important to be able to control and keep strong. And most people that have back issues or chronic back pain have no idea how to control it. It's called the transverse abdominis. Okay, so the transverse abdominis, let me just admit some people in our waiting room, I guess. All right, there we go. Everybody's welcome. All right, let me just blow up this picture here so that you can see. The transverse abdominis is this thing right here. It runs around like a girdle. If you've ever seen a back brace or a girdle, basically it wraps around from the back and it goes to the front. This muscle here, the transverse abdominis, is what's the most important core muscle that we're talking about. And a lot of times people have no idea how to do it. So let's see here. It doesn't create that much movement. That's the problem. When people start to do planks or sit-ups or some type of abdominal thing that they saw online or saw somebody else in the gym doing, there's a lot of movement that might cause strain to the back or the neck or other things. When the transverse abdominis fires, when that thing contracts, it just creates tension. Imagine, the back brace that you would wear, that's just your natural back brace. That thing just turns on and stabilizes everything. All right. Now, looking at it from the back view, we've got a lot of back musculature here that also, I would say, considered part of your core. Now, these smaller muscles in the lower back here, right? They go from segment to segment, these multifidus muscles. They're like the struts or the struts of a bridge or something, right? So they look like shingles and they go from one segment to another. If you contract them together, they basically stabilize. But if you have a spasm in your back, that's usually the one that kind of is the one that's at fault or goes into a spasm. Oops, I clicked the wrong button. Anyway, and then we have the QL muscle, quadratus lumborum. That kind of slides in right through here. You can see it on this side. It's not labeled, but the quadratus lumborum is another muscle that can go into a spasm as well. And there's other things that we can do to kind of mobilize that and relax that muscle. So, here's a picture of the quadratus lumborum right here. It goes from your bottom rib and then goes to your pelvis. And the psoas muscle and the iliopsoas muscle, or the iliacus and the psoas muscle, they join and make the iliopsoas muscle. They come from your lower back and insert into the front part of the hip. So oftentimes, if you're doing like a sit-up or a leg lift or something, and you feel it in your abs, it's basically your abs are fighting for dear life because this muscle, this hip flexor, the iliopsoas muscle, which is the iliacus and the psoas muscle, are lifting the legs. They basically do a hip flexion or lift the knees up. And then your lower back has to stabilize your muscles in your core. Your abdomen needs to stabilize your spine because they get pulled forward from this hip flexor muscle as you're doing some type of leg lifts or something. So if you do have back issues, I wouldn't recommend doing any leg lifts. All right, there's a lot of different things that you can do that can effectively target your core and protect your back and improve your athletic performance, and without causing any compensation or cheating from other muscles. All right, so this is what we're going to go through today. We're going to talk about some core strength exercises. What is the transverse abdominis? How do we activate that? And hip mobility and some body mechanics. So let me pull up my 2-shot here, and let's go to work. So this is the boring part of the class. Whenever I teach somebody, how to activate their transverse abdominis muscle. Again, it wraps around like a girdle. There's nothing going on and it looks like you're not doing anything. But the key thing is that because it's the deepest layer, the only spot that you can palpate or feel this muscle work is off of your pelvic bone or your hip bone. They're pretty easy to find. They're right around the front here. And you know, they're kind of pointy. So if you use that as your reference point and dive in about an inch towards your belly button, that's probably the spot that you can palpate the transverse abdominis muscle working, all right? So unlike other muscles, the transverse abdominis muscle should be on, or it functions like a light on a dimmer switch. If you are relaxed, sitting, standing upright, and your back is unsupported, that transverse abdominis muscle should always be on at least 20%. When you're pushing or pulling or lifting things, then it turns up to 100%. So this is how we're going to test it. You're going to put your hands on that hip bone that we found earlier. And you're going to dive your hands in towards your belly button. If you're on your back here like I am, knees are bent, and you're relaxed, that's soft. You can push in there. It's supple. I can push in about an inch or two into my gut, and the muscles are off. Now, if I pull my belly button into my spine, and this is key, I should feel that muscle, that area get tense. Now, oftentimes, people who have little control of this muscle will just suck in their breath and then hold their breath and basically create an artificial core stabilization using their diaphragm. The diaphragm's up here, lower ribs. Transverse abdominis is all the way down here. So we want to be able to breathe at the same time that we're trying to do this movement or activate this muscle. And then if you're successful, you can hold this position where I contract the that transverse abdominis. I feel that tension underneath my fingers, and then breathe, use my diaphragm up here, and not lose any tension in that muscle. It stays stable, it stays hard, it's contracted, okay? So that's why it looks like there's nothing going on. You have to really palpate this. Now, the next thing that we're gonna do is our 3 exercises that were developed by, I think, a Canadian biomechanist. He was Dr. McGill, and he did a lot of research on how to stabilize, on how the core works, and how to stabilize your spine. One of them is just a curl up. And the curl up is not like a push up or sit up or anything. It's very focused into creating tension into the abdominals. You're going to take your hands and then slide them underneath. I'm going to use one hand, but you could use 2. You slide them underneath your lower back, just above your belt line. There's a natural curve to your spine, so it should be easy to get under there. You have one leg straight, one leg bent, and then you're just going to use that transverse abdominis muscle, activate that, and try and increase the tension throughout the entire abdominal musculature to push your back into your hands, okay? So I'm just creating that tension. That's the first step. Once you're able to kind of create that tension, there's a little bit of a tilt that happens at the pelvis. You might see that, or you might feel that. And then let's see if you can lift your head and shoulders off the floor while activating the same things that we were doing earlier, okay? It's not a big movement. We want to be really focused and take it step by step. So again, transverse abdominis, we talked about that. Activate that. Push your back into your hand, pelvic tilting a little bit, and then raise your head and shoulders, not pushing off of the ground with this arm. So if I could hold this for maybe a couple seconds, I feel like this is turned on, and I don't feel that much pain or anything. I should not feel any pain, actually, when you do any exercise. If there is pain, neck, back, leg, or whatever, we need to scale or modify movements so that you can do them without pain. And then I would repeat with the other leg straight as well. The leg straight focuses the movement through the abdominal region versus trying to use the hip flexor to try and pull myself up. So if I'm doing like leg scissors like this is all hip flexor work. I mean, your back is trying to work hard against that, but oftentimes people's hip flexors are much stronger than their abdominal muscles. All right, so that's the curl up. The next one I want to go over is the side plank. Now you think about like this transverse abdominis is like a three-dimensional canister. It's a girdle. It wraps around. We hit the front. Now I want to hit the side. So I'm going to start with my elbow below my shoulder here, and my legs are going to be straight with my ankles flexed up. I want to lock this out and make this as rigid as possible. I'm going to take my other leg and put it out in front of that. So it looks like my feet are on a tightrope. My heel is touching my toe with the bottom leg behind the top leg. That's important because we're going to activate the hip when we do this move. You can take your other hand and put it on the shoulder here to kind of support it, but we want to keep the shoulder back and away from the ear and the neck. So we don't want to be sitting in here where we're just passively hanging out on the joint. We might create some shoulder issues. We want to push that away. So now I've got an active shoulder. I've got an active leg where I create that rigidity through my thigh and my ankles, and I'm going to lift my hips up and forward. So I get into the side plank position. I try and make my hips come forward and up, not just up, and I'm kind of flexed. I want to be as straight as possible. So it's not a big movement. Again, we're going to be working this entire side. So sometimes I'll have people go through a 10-second hold 10 times and then switch sides and do the same thing. Again, elbow below shoulder, keep that shoulder active, pull that shoulder blade back and down. Bottom leg is going to be straight, ankles flexed. Top leg is going to be in front, same thing, ankle straight, ankle flexed, knee straight. Engage the abdominals, bring my pelvis up and forward, creating tension here. So this is a difficult position to do, but we're activating the entire lateral side of the body in addition to the transverse abdominis. Now, if that's too difficult to hold, we could scale that down easily. Just stack up your knees like this. My hips are bent a little bit, but when I come up into that top position, I'm going to create a straight hip. My hips go up and forward. So looking from the front view, I've got this straight diagonal line, but if I turn it to the side, this is my start position. You can see how my hips are flexed, but when I come up, I bring my hip forward, so now I've got the straight line from shoulder, hip, knee, okay? And you could do the same thing, holding for 10 seconds, try and do 10 each side. Now, the last one that we're gonna do is the bird dog, which is activating the back sling or the back fascia, back muscles. You're gonna get onto your hands and knees and line up your knees below your hips and your hand below your shoulders. Keeping the abdominals on, again, that theme is this transverse abdominis, and think about like a glass of water on your back. We don't want the pelvis to move. We're gonna extend one leg and the opposite arm. So as we straighten out, I'm not raising up. I don't want to extend the spine. I don't want to rotate. I just want to feel like I'm stable, like a tabletop position here. And I'm straightening the leg nice and long behind me, and then out in front of me, nice and long. And again, 5 to 10-second hold if you want, and then switch sides and then do the other side. The bird dog is a very simple, fundamental exercise because we are on all fours. It's something that developmentally we learned very young to move and move on all fours. You could actually add more things like a bridge or lumbar extension, Superman movements if you wanted to. Those are much more difficult, but those are the 3 good exercises to work in introducing abdominal or core strengthening. All right, so hip mobility, pretty simple. What I want to do is a half kneeling hip flexor stretch. If you've been to any of my classes before, that iliopsoas muscle, it ends here in the front part of the hip, but it starts on your lower back. We want to release that and make sure that we can lengthen that to activate the abdominals correctly. So the hip flexor stretch, quick review, glute engaged. I'm going to squeeze my butt cheek, engage my abdominals, and then bring my pelvis forward. When I do this, I should feel a stretch through here. I can make sure that I can keep those muscles engaged as I go forward, because if I lock those muscles, the ends of the muscle that I'm trying to stretch are not stable. And like a rubber band, we're just going to kind of pull it forward. I can go farther into the stretch and not feel anything. But if I keep things really tight, the ends of the muscle are engaged, they're stable, and I should feel the stretch early in the movement. And the static hip flexor stretch, we're going to hold for 30 seconds. Okay, so 30 seconds each side. Now, body mechanics in terms of picking stuff up or being functional, we've gone over this a couple other times in other classes, but the main focus is the movement called the hip hinge. When we're engaging the core, the pelvis and your sternum, the two hands like at your belly button and your sternum here, when we're moving a load or pushing or pulling, these two hands, these two segments, these 2 points should never come together or come apart. So we call this the two-handed rule, that when we're lifting and pulling and pushing, we should always maintain that two-handed relationship, that distance between the two. So the hip hinge is me moving at my hips as I'm sending my hips back and getting down to pick something up, right? I could bend my knees a little bit, but the two-handed rule stays in effect the entire time. So if I'm successful at controlling my transverse abdominis, doing the curl up, the side plank, and the bird dog successfully and stabilize this, then this more complex movement, because there's a lot more moving parts, becomes much more stable and safe for our lower back. Okay, let me just take a peek at the chat here, see if there's any questions. Pull up the chat. Cool. All right, we don't have anything through here. Now, the last thing, bonus thing, got like a couple minutes left, is how do we relate all this core stability into sports, athletic performance, like tennis, golf, pickleball, something that is in a rotary motion. Like I mentioned at the beginning, that this golfer client came in and he's doing a lot of planks and sit-ups. So planks are very stationary. Sit-ups are very forward flexion. These types of motions here, when we create that, again, shortening of this two-handed rule, those are good, but they don't apply very well to athletics and sport. What we want to do is create some rotary stability and strength, engaging the hips, making sure that we lock this down, okay? So the exercise that I usually recommend for a lot of my athletes is called a Palloff press. I've got a cable here with 5 pounds of resistance. What I do is I set this perpendicular to my body. So it's attached to the wall over there. I'm facing 90 degrees away. I've got a rope handle, or you can go a single handle, doesn't matter. I usually start people in a kneeling position because this is the easiest position to organize everything. So kneeling, I can engage my glutes, squeeze the abdominals, and then squeeze the abdominals and squeeze the glutes. So everything here is kind of engaged and tight. Then I take this rope and I put it right at my chest. It's in front of my sternum. My hands are spaced equally, about shoulder width apart. And then with all of this center core engaged, I'm going to push this out. Now, I'm going to hold this position very similar to like a plank, but what happens is because this band or this weight, the resistance is attached 90 degrees from me, it's trying to pull my body to the right. It's trying to rotate. So I want to avoid that, but really activating all this abdominal stuff. And when we start to develop stability in this position, I could hold this for 20 or 30 seconds, take a break here, and then push it out again and hold that 20 or 30 seconds. I could start to apply this to different positions to challenge my stability and also apply it to sport. So here I've got a half kneeling position. I got most of my weight, or not all my weight, if not all my weight, on my inside leg, which would be my right leg. I got my right hip engaged, abdominals are going to be on. And if I wanted to add rotation here, I'm just going to go out in front, keep my abdominals engaged, and rotate off center. So now I have to create a lot of force through my abdominals, my transverse abdominis, and my obliques to do a rotary motion here, back to the middle, off to the side, without moving my lower body. So I create stability, lower body, and I can create this force, this rotary force. Once I'm there, I can get fancy, do it in like a golf posture, and start to do rotation. I could play hockey with it. I could play tennis, whatever I want to. Once I'm comfortable doing the basic mechanics of the exercise on the floor. Alrighty? All right, so let's pull up the camera here. All right. The question came through is like, when you have neck and shoulder pain, can those exercises you show us would help or should be kind of eliminated? Well, for head and neck issues, head and neck is basically an extension of your spine. If we have a two-handed rule for the torso, we also have a two-handed rule for the cervical spine. So this space right here should never come together or come apart. So if we can get your head over your shoulders and keep it there, we're free and able to do any of these exercises. So what I would suggest is, if you are having neck and shoulder pain, again, none of these exercises should hurt. If they do, there's an infinite number of ways to scale these exercises so that you can apply the methods, the core stability exercises, in a manner that protects your neck and doesn't hurt. So I think bird dogs are good because we're kind of flexed down. Side planks are good because we're not really moving the neck. The only thing that typically tends to happen with a lot of people is that the front part of the neck tends to get weak. The sides and the back, they tend to get tight because it's holding your head up against gravity. And oftentimes we're hanging out in this position. So all those muscles get a lot of work, but the ones in front are weak. So typically when we do like that curl up, when we're doing something up off the ground coming forward, that tends to put a lot of strain there. So that's when I usually start off with just isometric holds in that position, that first exercise. Well, hey, can you activate that transverse abdominis? And then if they can tolerate it, maybe do like a plank or that Palloff press hold, not any motion. So there's a lot of different ways, and a good trainer should be able to help you with that. All right, so I hope that answered your question. Any other questions, let me know. If not, oh, yes, there is a couple other questions. Can the last few exercises be with, can the last few exercises with dumbbells rather than the rope? All right, so that means that the Palloff press that we did there with the cable, can that be done with the rope? Can that be done with a dumbbell? No, okay? Because the force is laterally, it's a horizontal force, and we're using a dumbbell, the only force of the dumbbell is gravity, it goes straight down. It doesn't work. Russian twists, which is basically where you're laying down, you're kind of taking this weight and going side to side, not the same thing. And again, that engages a lot of the hip flexor, and then that might put too much stress on your back. So the Palloff press needs to be done with a cable column or some type of band, exercise band that's attached laterally to the body. All right. Oh, another question here is like, hope we get a class on tech neck. Well, the answer to that is probably there is one. I have made a lot of other classes, and you could find them on Better Spaces apps that working from home, how to protect your neck, body mechanics, stuff like that. So there is a plethora of stuff that I've done in the past, I say 2 years. And there should be a database or some way for you to search that as well. Okay. Alrighty, so it is coming up onto 1:30 here. Any other questions, or we'll shut it down? I hope you, oh, you're welcome. I hope you found this class helpful. I want to thank you all for joining me today. This is something I love to do, and you can look for this session and many more on demand on the Better Spaces app. So again, go to Better Spaces apps and the website. You can kind of see a whole bunch of other classes that I've done, also on YouTube if you wanted to. I will be back Tuesday, September 24th for Flexibility Fundamentals, enhancing range of motion and function. So we're going to unlock the benefits of flexibility training in improving mobility, reducing muscle tension, and preventing injury. We're going to cover the principles of flexibility training, the importance of proper stretching techniques, and strategies for improving flexibility safely and effectively. All right, we're going to learn about stretches. I gave you a little preview today. And we're going to target major muscle groups, neck, back, and incorporate those stretches into your fitness routine and your everyday motion or movement practice. All right. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to call or text me here. This is my cell phone and my email, paul@par5pt.com or team@betterspaces.com. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Be well.